Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm Alan, your host, and we've got a good one for you today. And we are recording at Hatch Fairhope in downtown Fairhope, and we appreciate Rick Miller and his group opening the Hatch up to us. And so if you guys want to find out more about what they do, you can go to hatchfairhope.com and check them out. Our guest today is Stephen Walling. And Stephen, we appreciate you being with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's just jump right into it. So before we started recording, you and I were talking about what you're doing now, and it's a lot. So you have a lot going on. Tell us a little bit about what your background is and what you're doing now.
Okay, so I went to school at the University of Montevallo, finished up in 2017 with a degree in finance and economics, jumped straight into real estate working for Rance Real at Coldwell Banker. I'm still there today. And I've always been kind of curious and wanting to learn more about the real estate process and each piece it's involved in as far as insurance, appraisals, and other things that go on. So about a year and a half after I got into real estate, I was approached about getting my appraisal license, started doing that on the commercial level, and that was about a little over a year ago. And then as of 4 or 5 months ago, I had someone approach me about insurance too, and so I proceeded to take the class and looking forward to taking the test on the 29th. Yeah. Just gotten really excited about all of it and just wanting to encapsulate as much knowledge as I can as I go along. Yeah. And it's found me kind of putting my hands in a little bit of everything.
Well, let me ask you this, and you may not consider yourself this, but I mean, it sounds to me like with everything that you have going on, and you've got a lot, that's a lot of that you have on your plate, but do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? Do you think you have that entrepreneurial spirit?
I actually had this talk with somebody last week, and I kind of don't know where to draw the line between a businessman and an entrepreneur. Yeah. And so I view an entrepreneur who almost births a new dream, starting something that's non-franchised. So if I were to go into something like the appraisal company or real estate or anything else, I'm just operating as a businessman under someone else. And so I wouldn't really see myself as an entrepreneur. If I was to go out and start my own real estate company or do something that's never been done, then I would see myself more as an entrepreneur. So I would say businessman would be the title.
But you don't strike me as somebody who is okay with an 8 to 5 clock in, clock out, sit behind a desk job, though, right?
That's accurate.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think and I think you're right. I mean, I think that people tend to kind of put entrepreneurs over here in this little pile of people that start something from the ground up and that kind of thing. But I do think you can have that bent, in you, even if you're working for somebody else. I think that's great. So let's jump into leadership. So when I say the word leader or leadership, what do you think?
I think empowerment of others is probably the first thing that jumps out at me. So I think leadership is based on your ability to draw out somebody's best character from inside themselves. They already possess those skills. They're already great, and they just don't know how to kind of be efficient in that matter. So your role is to kind of guide them and let them see that within themselves.
How has your view of leadership changed? Has it evolved as you've worked with different people and over time, or is it something that you've always kind of had a pretty good handle on as far as what when you think of a leader, and you gave a great definition? I think that's spot on, but has it evolved over time, or have you always kind of landed right there?
Drastically. So I think early on, even in elementary school and middle school, I was always the kid when you have a group of people and you're assigned to a project. I was kind of the one that raised my hand and said, hey, I can orchestrate this. Yeah. And as I grew older, talking with my grandfather and other business people, it's always been delegate associated with leadership. And I took that as telling people what to do in a sense. Yeah. Basically saying, hey, you need to do A, B, and C by this deadline. And if it doesn't get done, we'll have a different conversation. And so as I've gotten older, become more empathetic, seeing people's situations that go on and then finding a way to teach them to do it. It's like they say, you take a man to fish, you feed him for a day, you teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Right. It's kind of the same principle. Taking the extra time on the front end to be able to teach them to do it and want to do it for that matter. And then you can kind of take a back seat and move forwards on something else. Yeah,
that's great. Well, you mentioned your grandfather. So was he a businessman? What's his background?
He was. That's a funny story. He got out and coached football and was a biology teacher for a few years and then started working for Waffle House. And it's a really long story. I could take up a whole podcast just talking about how he fell into that. Yeah. And he took a job with more business forms, actually, selling paper products and printers and stuff. And someone approached him overnight about joining Waffle House. And this was back in the 50s and 60s when they were just starting out and getting really big. And so he got in with them, and it was just nothing but hard work for 31 years. And then he finally retired with the company. But when something happens, they're very proactive. They deal with it right then and right there, and that's carried on to what he's taught me for business is if something comes up, you stop what you're doing, you address the situation. Yeah. So that way it doesn't linger on and take up way more of your time later on.
Yeah.
A bigger problem.
Yeah.
So.
I like that. Well, one of the boxes you checked in show primer is leading by example. So it sounds to me like maybe your grandfather is one, but you've had some pretty good examples in your life of leaders and people who are empathetic and care and don't just want to be the boss. And
Yes, sir. So I think my grandfather's probably the one. He always says, learn to step on somebody's shoes without ruining their shine. And he's been very good about that. You kind of empathize with them, but still get your point across. You don't want to come across as demanding. You want them to work for you, and you've got to be able to find a way to teach them to do that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we asked you what you consider the qualities of a good leader, and empathy and understanding is one that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part that's lost in translation is when every new leader comes up or someone that's in a higher position, they immediately think delegate. And I don't know why I go back to that, but they say they see the paper of what needs to be done, and you go out and bark orders, and no matter how it gets done, that's what needs to be done. And that kind of loses the touch, because when you work somewhere, you want to be excited and happy to go to work every day and love what you do.
Right.
And that can create a giant void between management and the other people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we mentioned it several times, and different people have said it, but there is a vast, stark difference between a boss and a leader.
Right.
I've seen leaders, and I'm sure maybe you have too. There are leaders that have no one under them formally, directly, right? But people look at them as leaders.
They have some special quality. Like there are certain people that you sit down and talk to and you gravitate towards in a leadership role, and wherever they're leading as far as the company or what their ideas are, you want to jump on board.
Right.
You say, what can I do to help? What can I do to get involved in this? And I think it's a special character trait that some people have. Yeah.
Well, all right. So leader, born or made, where do you land on that? I've asked this question a lot, and we've had I don't know if you've listened to any of the other episodes. I mean, you should have listened to all 82 or whatever their prior episodes, by the way, Stephen. So, but anyway, so I've asked that question several times. Where do you land on that?
I want to say both, and that's a very difficult answer. But the way that I explain it is, so for your muscle fibers, your body has type A and type B muscle fibers. They're fast twitch and slow twitch. You're born with one, and whichever one you're born with, you can mimic or copy the other one. Say you have type B and you're mimicking a type A, like a fast twitch muscle fiber. If the person with the fast twitch muscle fibers are working on that, you're never going to be, they have that cutting edge above you because they're born with it. It comes more natural. It's smoother.
Yeah.
And that was a feeble attempt at the explanation, but I think that it's both. I think you can be born, everyone's born with those qualities. There are many different types of leadership, but if you're not working on them and like doing the podcast and empowering other people and trying to be better every day, then I think if you don't use it, you'll lose it almost.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that everyone, and Carrie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that everyone that I've asked that question to has pretty much said the same thing. I mean, everybody kind of lands in the middle. I don't think anyone has ever committed to born versus made, but I think you're right. I mean, there are innate qualities in everybody. Charisma is one that I don't think that can be taught. I think it's natural, but I think that people can work on their communication skills and people skills to make them more, relatable to the people that they're leading. So I agree with everything you said there.
If I was to have to choose one of the two, I would definitely say made over time because, like we said, there are different types of leadership qualities. So just because you don't have perfect speech or you're not good in front of public audiences or you can't take on a 100-man company, I think that you can be a leader in different roles. So I would definitely say made if I had to pick one of the two. Yeah,
agreed. All right, well, let's circle back. And so we mentioned empathy and understanding, which you've spoken eloquently about, but you also said grit and determination. So expand on that.
Being a leader is very difficult, and you have to be determined in what you do as far as consistency. Because when you're a leader, you have the audience looking at you. And if you decide to take a day off or have a bad day, and we all do, but you've got to kind of put that aside and look at the people that are looking up to you in a sense and be able to be consistent and set the right tone every single day and to make positive decisions for not only you but the people around you as well.
Right.
And so I think that comes with a level of determination because I know we all have bad days when you wake up and sometimes when you go to work you just can't show that.
Yeah. Well, and being a effective leader is not an easy job always. It's going to come with its set of challenges. The stick-to-itiveness, as my granddaddy used to say, is a good quality to have. Also, you mentioned optimistic and have a vision. What's important about having a vision, and then do you think it's important to share that vision with others?
I think so. I leaned a little bit on optimism too because I think a lot of the best ideas come from the bottom up, and then when you have somebody who creates the idea from the bottom, they believe in it, so they're more willing to spread that going up. And so that's why you got to maintain optimism because if you're just saying this is what we're going to do, people aren't going to buy into that. You want everybody to be on the same page. So for vision too, I think clarity and vision go in line, because if you start something, you have to have a vision or a light at the end of the tunnel in a sense. And the more clear that you can draw that picture, I think the faster that you'll get there. Mm-hmm. People talk about what you want in life, and they've envisioned this big house and the car and all these things. But if you can envision the brick house with these shutters and this shingle on the roof and this exact car, you have more of a drive to get there. Mm-hmm. And so what your 10-year goal or your 5-year goal was, it may end up with a 6-month goal or a 1-year goal, because you're willing to work harder because you can see it right there in front of you.
Yeah. We kind of subscribe to this theory at our firm, but you have to, yes, you absolutely need to have a long-term vision, a 3, 5, 10-year vision, but it's also important to break that down into baby steps, because I think a lot of times if you continually just look 5 and 10 years down the road, you kind of miss the trees for looking at the forest, because there are things that have to happen to get you to where you want to be in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I agree completely. Haley Budlong has been a big help for me on this, but celebrating the small victories is a big deal. So I think quarterly we've started kind of setting goals, just little things. And we do quarterly goals, and we'll go out to dinner to kind of celebrate those little victories, whether it be a financial goal or something you did at work or a new listing that's important or whatever it may be. And then that way, when you get to the end of the year, you can really look back, and it's piled up a lot more than you think. So.
Yeah. Stacey Welborn was on a few weeks ago, and she mentioned the same thing, and she likes to include champagne in her celebration. So I was like, hey, that's a winner. I can get on board with that. So you mentioned your grandfather as being an influence and a leader you admired, and you also mentioned Tony Robbins. So talk a little bit about Tony and who he is and what you get from him.
There are a lot of different speakers out there today. You have Gary Vee, and Tony Robbins is big in my book for motivational speaking in a sense, because he takes not only the business aspect, he's not just pushing, this is how you grow your business, this is how you make money, this is how you do that. He talks about relationship advice and how you're to go on with your family life and to find a balance between work and family, and does week-long seminars on these things. But when you see him standing on stage, it just kind of resonates with me, because you can feel him giving back to the people he's talking to. He's not just there to collect a paycheck or to do a speech or anything like that. Yeah. He's genuinely trying to empower you and lead you to kind of be your best self. And so that's always, from the first video I listened to, the way his voice is and the message he was portraying, it just stuck with me.
So talk about the balance. You seem like a pretty driven guy, and so I would imagine, and I could be totally off base here, but I could see you maybe having a hard time turning off that drive in your mind. So what do you do to kind of decompress and kind of step away from all these things you have going on?
I do. So there will be some people that'll listen to this and laugh and agree with you completely, because I do tend to work as much as I can. And with the jobs that I do have, the ceiling is endless. Yeah. And so I'm going to push the gas and go as hard as I can as far as work goes. Right. And so finding time with family, whether it be with my family or my girlfriend or whatever it may be, has been very important in the last year. And I think, I don't even mean to bring this up, but with the coronavirus and everybody slowing down a little bit, it has caused a lot more free space in my schedule. Right. And so capitalizing on that, whether it be me time or family time, I've been trying to read a lot more than I usually do. Usually I have to cram it in either the morning or the afternoon before bed, but I take a little window in the afternoon to read, or to take my girlfriend to lunch or to dinner, or to go somewhere with my family, and just kind of being more intentional with your time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is, if you're listening to this in real time, I mean, we're dealing with COVID-19 and all the disruption that it causes. And so I think, and you're right, people do have a lot of time on their hands, and I think people can react one of two ways, and it sounds like you've taken maybe the best way, but you can either lay on your couch, eat Doritos, and watch Netflix all day, or you can take this new time that you found that you've been forced to take, really, and be productive.
Right. I think people will tell you that they're still extremely busy, but if they look at their day, there are a lot of hours that you can be doing something else with. And so you've hit the nail on the head. You can kind of take the glass half empty approach and just say, wow, this coronavirus is taking over and my business is doing horrible. Or you can cultivate new ideas, come up with new business plans for when we bounce back, because it's not a if, it's a when. Right. And just kind of take this opportunity to kind of feed your mind. I mean, start reading more books, look at stuff online, listen to podcasts, listen to ebooks and everything. There's a million different things that you can do. Yeah, agreed. Well, let's pivot. And God Almighty, I was going to say pivot. There are a couple of words that have entered our vernacular since the COVID-19 crisis hit. Pivot is one. I've heard pivot used so many times that I'm tired of hearing pivot. And if I never hear the term social distance again, it'll be too soon.
I mean, I have heard that until I just want to bang my head against the wall. But anyway, I digress. So you're also very community-minded. It's obvious in your involvement. So you're involved in a lot. You're involved in the Eastern Shore Chamber of Commerce and actually won the Ambassador of the Year in 2018. So that's great. Congratulations on that. Family Center Board of Directors, Ecumenical Ministries, Young Professionals Board of the Eastern Shore. So why is it important to you to give back to your community in the ways that you are?
I think getting into real estate, it actually came from Rance Real when I sat in his office and I said, I'll do anything. What's the best way to grow my business? And he said, shake the hands of the people around you and let them know that you care. And so I think that you can take the transactional perspective to real estate, and I could sit there and call and you'll never meet me. Mm-hmm. And that's not as personal as if I go and do something that you also do, like Meals on Wheels for Ecumenical Ministry, and you meet and you have a common bond. And you're more willing to take that person in, tell other people about that person. And it's not really even for business. It's just give back to the community that you're in. And, you know, especially with all this stuff going on, if you see something you don't like or something you don't agree with, go out and change it. Do something to change that. Don't just sit at home and talk about why you don't like that. And so I think that's the biggest thing I've been trying to do is just kind of get out and have a voice.
Well, so, and it gets back to relationships. I mean, we haven't really driven this home lately, but I mean, I know I've said it before, that at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, no matter if you're leading a team or if you're the one being led or if you're doing community work like you are. At the end of the day, the base is relationships with people that you're involved with.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it's just about uplifting people.
So let me ask you this as we get ready to start wrapping up. You mentioned, you know, you've been reading more and podcasts and that kind of thing. So can you, I know Tony Robbins obviously is one that you've already pointed out, but can you give our listeners a resource in the form of a book or author or podcast or a combination of those that sticks with you?
I can. So I actually just ordered some new books. I got Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and a new book called Too Perfect, and it actually talks about balance in your life, about when being in control is too out of control. And so it kind of gives you perspective on when you may be working too much or when you may be slacking off a little bit too much, and finds the line in between and where you sit. But I just finished another book. It's called See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar.
Okay.
And it's coincidental. He autographed the book that my granddad has, and it's probably 40 years old. And I looked in the front of it and saw my granddad's name and Zig's signature. And I said, how'd you get this? And he said, I used to go to his seminars all the time. And that kind of really hit home with my grandfather being a big leader in my life. And I read this book, and as he goes through it, he gives a staircase. And on each stair, there's work, determination, and different things to lead towards the door of success. And the door of success is at the very top. And by the end of the book, you have a completely different outlook on life. The one thing that stuck out to me throughout the whole book is he talks about we need to feed our minds above the neck as much as we feed ourselves below the neck. So he talks about you wake up every day and you eat and you get hungry and you can't go to bed without putting something in your stomach. And he says, I wish the brain could do the same thing. I wish you could get to the end of the night, and if you haven't fed your brain something, you can't sleep. And he said we would be so much more intellectual if we were to do that.
That is great. And, you know, we've done 80-something episodes, and Zig Ziglar I don't think has come up yet, but he is timeless in my mind. I mean, I think he's passed away now, but he, a great motivational speaker and just someone that I've listened to and seen all my life. Even though, you know, he's been around even since your granddad's time back in the 50s and 60s, he still, I mean, his advice and what he has to say about leadership and his motivational views are really timeless. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. So let me ask you this. Do you, big music guy?
I'd like to think so. Okay. I kind of dabble in everything. I don't have a specific thing that stands out.
Good. All right. Well, tell me what's on heavy rotation on the Spotify or iTunes. I hadn't asked that question in a long time, and it's always a good one.
I've been listening to the radio a lot.
Okay.
Other than listening to the radio, I've been trying to listen to more podcasts. They do the whole thing of your car is your school bus for learning.
Yeah.
And so when I'm listening to music, it depends on how I feel during that day or what I have going on. If I'm going to a listing appointment or have some big business deal, I may listen to something more upbeat. It's just kind of relaxing with the windows down and maybe some country music for the afternoon. Or if I have a long drive, say to Mobile or Pensacola, I'll try to put on a podcast. And it all depends on what I'm interested in at the moment or trying to learn about.
Yeah.
And after finishing the Zig Ziglar book, I've been really interested in the subconscious mind and what it's capable of. Because you may hear something cognitively right in front of you, and then you can't repeat it 30 minutes later.
Right.
And in the book, he talks about a kid who he circles out 3 paragraphs on one newspaper article. And he says, memorize these 3 paragraphs. And need in mind, there's 15 paragraphs on the whole thing. He says, memorize these 3. And the kid stands up and recites the 3 almost perfectly without stuttering or anything. And then he says, now tell me the other 15 that are around it. And he goes, well, I can't do that. And then he talks about the subconscious mind. He said when he went to sleep, he could recite the entire page word for word. And he says, you pick up on things without even knowing about it. And if we were able to tap into those thoughts and ideas, you would be so much smarter than you are. So kind of fascinated by that.
No, that's good stuff. So last question. I've been on this food kick lately. So give me your perfect meal. What's a perfect meal look like for Stephen Walling?
A big plate of sushi.
Okay, nothing wrong with that.
So, yeah. I don't know which rolls would be on there, but I think a big plate of sushi, because after all the Corona stuff, I've kind of stopped going out to restaurants and things like that. And so there's only a handful of the good sushi places around here. So when you try to go out and do that, it's been packed. So I've kind of avoided it, but I miss going out and getting sushi.
Look, I can draft with you on that one. That's nothing wrong with that. Stephen, thank you so much for your insights. This has been great. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. As always, a big thanks to producer Carrie Wolf. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avisogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.